So I'm very delighted to be here today. I don't know how far you're familiar with Ripple because I'm going to talk about something abstract, and I'm trying to make it somehow more understandable in terms of the vision that we are trying to achieve. So our company is based in San Francisco. I joined personally 2 years ago. I'm coming from the old world of SWIFT, where the international payment is happening today. And I was very much interested in the vision that Ripple was cultivating at that time, which is the Internet of Value. We will come back to that later. We have been now expanding globally, so our European office is in London. I hope that you will have the opportunity to join us one day to visit us. This is, well, it's not a sales speech, honestly, because I think when you're talking about the new technology, especially blockchain, that has been in experimentation since few years, but going live with a new technology is a very challenging, I should say, context. And personally, I can tell you, it's the most difficult job that I have ever had in my life. Clearly, these names are not around experimentation anymore. We are talking about the banks and financial institutions, payment service providers, the new entrants that are investing in this technology and have signed production volumes. I think this is a very big step from a technology that started a few years ago and is still quite abstract for many people, and it is not going mainstream. Coming back to the world that we are living today, we are living more and more in a global world. And I think one of the advantage of the blockchain is the fact that it is decentralized. So there is no central counterparty that it is controlling the world. And I think that has been the promise of the blockchain. But blockchain has its own limitations and challenges, which is normal for a new technology, which is not necessarily matured and needs more use cases to get to this maturity. But what I'm coming here is that blockchain use case, the first use case is a decentralized payment network. And when you look at the globalization, you have certain items and elements that are important to work together. But blockchain is more a network itself. It's not a network of the network. And I will come back to that, why. When you're thinking about the globalization, there are many people that are disillusioned. And this is not necessarily because the globalization is bad, but because there is something missing. And let's take a look at the analogy that we are using for a fire. You need these three elements in order to have fire. So you need fuel, heat, and oxygen. If you don't have all these three elements, you won't get fire. It's the same thing with the globalization. And this is around three major elements. First of all is around goods. We have disrupted the good, and I will come back to that. The transportation has changed completely. We have disrupted the data. You are living in an internet world. You are sending an email, and if it is more than 2 seconds, you are getting bored. But on the payment side and on the transfer of the value, this is not yet there. If you look at the way that the payment is happening today, definitely you will be scared. Probably you will have some user experiences that obviously is coming with the new and challenger banks or challenger parties, but the process behind still is very archaic and belongs to the decades. So, coming back to each of these elements, let's think about the pre-container world, early 19th century. So that was how it was happening. It was no standardization in terms of how the goods were transported. It was very costly and very slow. A simple idea of standardization was the container. I think this is very basic, probably for us is a given. But at that time, and the fact that the containers standardized the way that we are transporting stuff has completely changed our experience. That means that we automate from the ship to the train and to the truck. And can you imagine that from, I think the percentage is impressive. More than 700,000, this has increased the trades today. The trades that probably you don't even imagine about it anymore, because this is happening behind the curtains. When we are thinking about the data, I think in the 90s, when the internet started, you had to be in the same network in order to communicate with the others. So that means that there was no interoperability between different networks. Today, you don't have this issue anymore. You don't even think about it. You just send a message, you just send a text, and you live with it because it's becoming part of the nature of the way that we are connected truly today. I think you have many examples of the mobile that today you use. You order a ticket, and this is about always experience. So a technology, especially blockchain or all this buzz or hypes, I think at the end is translating to what is the experience that you want to bring to the end user. I think that's today, if you look at it, doesn't exist in the payments. When you are looking at the backbone of the cross-border payments today, I don't know how far you're familiar. Probably you are using the cross-border payments, you are sending money, and probably you are giving certain experience, but behind that, it's a chaos. You have multiple intermediaries that are beefing up the amounts and adding margins. You have the processes that belongs to decades in terms of the AML, in terms of the reconciliation. You have multiple ledgers involved. And more importantly, when you want to today make a cross-border transfer, you need to pre-fund. So that means that you need to send them money sometimes 24, 48 hours in advance in order to ensure that the global economy is moving. This has a cost. Probably you don't feel it because it's hidden in the cost of the banks or your financial services, but this has a cost for everybody. And it's not the fault of the banks. It's the way that the operation is taking place today. According to certain studies, I'm giving one of the most important one, McKinsey, for instance, millions and billions of the money is trapped into the nostro-vostro relationship of the banks in order to ensure that the global economy is working. So, now, this is for the banks. This is with the high value payments. If you try to send $50 or 50 euros, you will see that the difference is, the experience is exactly the same. If you want to, there are beef up in the amount. If you are in a poor world, we are really lucky people here. We are in Western countries, we are living well, and we don't know what is 50 cents for a remitter or a poor person that is sending to family. I can tell you, there is no infrastructure today that handles with this segment, and even with the larger segments. When we look at the economy today and the role of the SMEs, there is no market infrastructure today globally that can facilitate and democratize the way that the payment is transferred today. So, and you're talking about Internet of Things. Internet of the Things, if you look at it, in few years' time, there will be more things that are needing to connect together than people. So if you're talking about 3 billion or 7 billion today of human being, with the Internet of Things, this is going to be much more complex. And today, the micropayment doesn't exist. And I think blockchain is one of the means of getting to this improvement. So, why payments? Because probably you have heard about many different experimentation around payments, blockchain. You have trade finance, derivatives, lending, you can name it. When you look at the common denominator of all these businesses, it's always about money at the end. There is a transfer of funds. And most of the time, in the global economy, you are talking about international and cross-border funds. Therefore, I think the real pain point that blockchain can really address today and make this world more democratized is around payments. And that's why our company, Ripple, has been concentrating more on this space. When you are talking about payments, you have a series of features that you need. You need the predictability of the settlement, you need to high throughput, and you need the scalability. If you look at today, and I think real time is becoming a reality. We have it in Europe, we have it in many other markets. So you can send money within a local context to another person in a matter of seconds. But this matter doesn't exist today in cross-border. Okay? Even if they tell you that it exists, it doesn't, because they take risk each time. So what does it mean today? That when you look at the global e-commerce, we are talking of no longer high-value payments, that it is very important in the treasury and trades. We are talking about multiples of low-value payment, high frequency. And that's where we think not only blockchain, but the digital assets that it is a component of the blockchain technology can be very beneficial if it is rightly used. We have done a series of, I'm sure you're familiar with Bitcoin, Ethereum. Ripple has its own as well, a digital asset, which is called XRP. But when you get to the high volumes payments, as I mentioned, you need a certain features. And we have been trying to compare that with different, at least the top three existing crypto assets. So XRP, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. Clearly what you see that there are huge differences in terms of the performance, in terms of the transaction per second, and in terms of the cost. And this is how we want to get to this democratization, how we want to remove the barrier of pre-funding for the banks and ensure that you can source on-demand liquidity at a much more democratic price. Well, I don't know how far these are abstract for you, how digital asset can change this world. But I think I will give you a very simple example. Today, you are a payment service provider and you have $100 and you want to send to a market like Mexico, okay? So what do you do normally? You go to your bank and your bank is pre-funding the amount, and somehow is charging you for $25 and then the amount is sent. After a few days, you will probably receive a confirmation, sometimes not. But the idea is that, and I'm not talking about the really consumer use case. I'm talking about really institutional use case because that's where they have to put the money in advance and pre-fund. The idea is very simple actually, is that rather than going, this is of course, the product is live and is used by the payment service providers and banks are progressively moving to that. So rather than going to your banks, you go to the crypto exchange, you have an account with the crypto exchange as a financial institution, you put your $100 and you convert that immediately to XRP in this case, because it's the digital asset. So XRP is used as a bridge currency. And with the real-time capability of the blockchain, you reconvert back that to the Mexican peso and automatically is delivered to the local market. This is transformational. That means that you don't even need an account, a nostro-vostro relationship, and you don't need to pre-fund that. So the whole cost of and complexity around liquidity management between financial institutions is transformed. So we are very confident that with more we advance in terms of understanding blockchain and the different use cases of the blockchain, we hope that the crypto asset can play a beneficial role in the democratization of the liquidity management. Now, coming back to the networks, there are multiple networks. It's very complex. You have banks network, blockchain, money mobile, and it's getting even more complex. This is back the scene, and you don't see it. But this creates many costs. So I talked about that. I will just move first. So I think it was mentioned, real-time on-demand liquidity, the low cost and inexpensiveness of the payment, no delays or failures, and having an elegant experience is a trend today, and there is no way. And probably the digital banks like N26 and many others are doing that because of these requirements. But blockchain necessarily doesn't resolve the fragmentation and doesn't create necessarily the interoperability because it is still a network on its own. Therefore, we think that the world needs a network of the network. So that means that you can connect all this fragmentation and have a, let's say, more operational and cost-efficient way. At Ripple, we have developed a protocol that it is called Interledger Protocol. In blockchain, you have different versions of that. But this is very important. So this is not is an open source, and it is you can go to the website of Interledger and you can download it. But the importance is that it has actually the capacity to connect any kind of ledger regardless of who you are. And I think this is for us a very important point in terms of bringing the interoperability. Just to make an allusion to how the internet is working today, you get to a page, you open a page, is because of the TCP/IP that the information is gathered. So that means that the interoperability that you see is because of this capacity. What we see with ILP, Interledger Protocol, is exactly the same thing, is that ILP is connecting all the different ledgers. So in the future, if there are multiple blockchains, we hope that the ILP or the protocols like that can create the interoperability and remove from, again, a fragmented world that we are living today. So, Internet of Value, from really blockchain perspective, cannot be achieved only by the technology itself. We believe that the role of the digital assets, if it is used in a proper use case, can enable the Internet of Value. Thank you.